millennials, Gen Z, like we all are inheriting a very difficult situation, right? And everybody wants to see people try to do something to make a difference in the world. And when you live in a capitalist society and you watch these massive companies just print dollar after dollar, seemingly not giving at all of an F what happens to anybody else, it's infuriating. It is a rallying call. So for us, that was why we were like, okay, we have to do this. And this is where our community came from. But then you see other brands, exactly like you're saying, just, whatever the flavor of the week is. Oh, we're going to throw a 50% donation to this trending cause. And it's like, people see through that. And I think, especially if you are making this decision, you have to make it a serious one. And it has to be one that you're going to stand behind.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to be chatting with Richard Henne, who splits his time between a prior project that sort of came back into his lap, as well as a bunch of new projects. So, Richard, how do you split up your day at the moment?
A little bit of magic in the wildness. It's a little bit of just trying to take whatever emergency you have to deal with first, and then treading water to the next one. But fortunately, it keeps things exciting, and we do our best.
So, what's the origin story for Ivory Ella for folks who don't know about that brand?
Yeah, of course. Happy to walk through all of it. Basically started getting involved with entrepreneurship back in, I guess 2013 now. Time is flying. I feel like I'm starting to get my gray hairs in, but we were doing Twitter marketing and social media marketing before a lot of people had kind of started getting involved in the space. We had some of the first parody pages. So, cute puppy dog pics would be a page, flower pics would be a page, travel, things like that. And we would do marketing campaigns for brands over the years, but eventually we decided, hey, maybe it's time we pool our resources and build something for ourselves. So junior, senior year of college, we started our first brand called Boho Outfitters. It was a women's resale wholesale site. So we would buy bulk dresses. I would be at the tech center late at night writing product descriptions, trying to make things up as we go. Rompers. Yes, you romp in the rompers. And that went for a little bit, and we did what we could. And I think we probably got that up to around $40,000 a month, which was crazy for a bunch of college kids. But I think we realized that there was maybe potential to do something bigger. At the time, the Ringling Brothers circus documentary had just come out on HBO. Elephants were really in the news. We had a lot of random elephant branded product that had taken off. And the last piece of goodie was seeing that on social media, baby elephants were really in trend. So we said, okay, let's pull our knowledge together. Let's try to build a brand. And ultimately, this was how Ivory Ella was born. We created a logo. We workshopped it for a while. And then slowly over the next couple of weeks, we would tease it out on these social accounts. What is this elephant brand? What are they working on? Who is this? What is coming? And eventually we got the brand to the point where we said, we have something special. The logo is special, but it needs to have something that makes it really stand out from other companies. And this is where we decided to donate 10% of net profits to saving the elephants and other charitable causes. To this date, I still believe if we had not made that choice, especially prior to launch, we would have never had the viral success that we did, because ultimately the world is a very messy place and people want an easy way to give back. So we decided on this mission. We called my now very good friends from Save the Elephants, a charity in Kenya. I said, hey, we're looking to launch a brand in the next coming weeks. Do you think we could use you as a charitable partner? They said, absolutely not. That is crazy. What are you talking about? You're a bunch of college kids. No. So we said, okay, we appreciate that. We understand. Fast forward, we got to launch day. We got our 500 shirts pre-printed, ready to go. And when we launched, we sold out of 500 shirts in about 13 minutes. So for us, didn't really know what to do. We were in a bit of a panic mode. We decided, okay, let's either turn off the website and tell them, sorry, we got to work on supply chain, or we set it on pre-order and say, we're going to figure it out no matter what it takes. That day we put it on pre-order. We ended up doing $150,000 in our first day. We were trending above the Country Music Awards on Twitter. Things were flying off the walls. We called back our charity partner and I said, hey, we have a $30,000 check for you. Do you think we could maybe work together now? And since then, they've been our lifelong partner. They've been very close friends and family to us. And we're actually approaching our 9th anniversary in just a couple of weeks here on April 15th. So crazy ride, but that is basically the origin story for Ivory Ella.
Well, that is a crazy story and has a great, continuing adventure element to it. I know a lot of times with nonprofit initiatives, folks like to sort of understand sort of the quantified result, right? So for a lot of folks, they don't realize that in underdeveloped countries, like a $20,000 check, quite how far it goes, and whether that's building a school for kids or drilling a well, or protecting elephants, they don't quite realize how big of an impact they can have. So as you sort of report back to your customers and quantify things, are there any sort of interesting numbers that have come back that really sort of make show the impact that you've managed to deliver?
Oh yeah. Definitely stories that I can tell, which are really fun. One of the big things that we made sure we did with these guys was for our funds to be unrestricted. There's a lot of debate in the nonprofit world about restricted versus non-restricted. However, for this charity in particular, a lot of what they are doing is building relationships with the locals on the ground. I don't think a lot of people understand how important it is to have that aspect, especially when trying to protect wildlife, because if the locals are not on the same page, it's going to be a losing game in the long run, right? So for us, a lot of the different things our money went to, rather than just the elephant collars, we replaced the engine on their scouting plane, which is really cool. Tons of supplies and stuff for the team. We actually were able to help the surrounding communities do some things too. So you mentioned a school, one of the largest public schools in the area, where they're trying to preach conservation, protection of the elephants, showing them that you can actually make a circular market of protecting them and generating revenue and building up communities. They had this massive school, but the problem was it was a major transportation hub. So people would be riding motorcycles through all day, every day, right through the middle of the school. Wild animals could go up to the buildings where kids were sleeping. I mean, it's like as much in the thick of it as you can imagine. And we were able to build a perimeter fence around the entire school. The kids there have gone from like under 100 to 500 plus. I think last time we checked, we were getting closer to the 1,000 number. And that was something we were able to do by simply saying, hey, like, we want you to take these funds and do what's best for all of the local area. And that was really one that stood out to me as like a special thank you from them, because it wasn't something that a normal donation to Save the Elephants would have been able to go to, as they always usually want to see that one-to-one direct feel. How much money did I put in? How many elephants did I save? And I think a big part of this was it's a lot more complicated than that, and understanding all the different levers that come into a bigger picture, I think was really eye-opening for me, especially.
Great. Well, there's some other things that you co-founded that are still on your LinkedIn profile. Not sure how much of your time they get, whether it's Soothie or cartoons.
Yeah.
And then you've got some investor activity with Bezel. So, do those end up making it into your weekly to-do list, or is a lot of them sort of in holding mode at this point?
Yeah, it's a little mix of both. I think a lot, we were kind of talking briefly too before jumping on. Having that core team is really important, right? And over the years, I've really tried to make really long-lasting relationships with the people I work with. I'm a big believer that reputation is everything. So really having people that have my back, even when I'm busy, is something very near and dear to me. I have a very strong team at Soothe. They're friends from college who I grew up with. They just love the opportunity to be able to run their own brand. So fortunately, I've gotten that to a place to be on autopilot, and that's ultimately my goal for a lot of these smaller projects. Cartoons was a little bit of a crypto escapade. We can always have those conversations, but that's the whole wild west of crypto. Now I'm kind of finding myself at this point of I have so much experience and connections of growing brands, but also breaking brands. As I'm sure you can imagine, having 6 unexperienced founders running a massively viral company, you learn a lot of things that doesn't work either, right? So at this stage, I've really found a lot of my time trying to help other founders. I'm not necessarily out there selling myself or trying to pitch some massive agency, but I work with people who have referred to me, people who are in the startup space, people who are looking for a little bit more experience, to just pick the brain. And I love helping founders and helping them on that journey. So while I have most of these little side projects up and running, really where I'm finding my passion as I'm starting to just get into my 30s and move away from the one-stop shop is trying to help other people follow that path too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just incorporated the eMarketing Foundation as a nonprofit because things are moving so quickly that people's knowledge isn't necessarily up to where it should be. So that's going to have a big educational focus to it, and we'll try to probably do most of the education via distance modalities.
Sure.
We may even end up doing some stuff here in New York for folks who want to come up to speed and understand, for example, how to use AI and the fact that AI is not the enemy, right? And understanding best practices around the intersection of AI and marketing. But even the marketing fundamentals, it's amazing how often I'll go in, and look at a company I acquired, Truth Nutrition, and their marketing ducks were pretty much in a row. But when we go in as an agency and we look at folks' businesses, it's amazing how often the fundamentals are broken.
Yeah.
From a tracking perspective, not having the business intelligence to even know the difference between your best customer and your average customer, and things that can make a material difference and really are sort of low-hanging fruit. And it's amazing how much of a difference that kind of stuff makes.
Fundamentals and foundation, I think, are the most important thing of any business. And as somebody who made it all up as we went, I know for a fact that it would have been so much easier if we had those building blocks in place early on. So I couldn't agree more. And I do think it's fascinating, like even all AI, even like all these new tools that come out and people keep thinking it reinvents the game. They're really just other ways to supplement already existing strategies and make them more efficient and more effective, and lowering costs, especially with things like AI now too. So as long as you have those fundamentals and you understand the basics, I really do think it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. But a lot of times, special consultants or whatever it might be, might make it seem like it's a little bit harder than it is. Where to your point, if you just track those basics, you understand your customer, you understand your product market fit, the rest should all fall into place.
So I noticed you're sort of lending your brain to Robo Squad as well. So how did that end up being part of your weekly to-do list?
Yeah. So Robo Squad's a fun one for me. I'm a pretty big nerd deep down. My father used to run a comic book store back in the day. So really love all of the fantasy sci-fi side of things. Funny enough, when we had exited Ivory Ella, got introduced to a founder by the name of Dan Baczynski, and he's creating his own indie studio video game, free to play, Steam, Epic. And he was looking for somebody that had growth hacking, organic marketing talents. And my passion for video games combined with my networking skills and my marketing skills was a perfect mix. And now I'm in there. I'm helping game test the game, everything from Q&A, story, characters, gameplay. And it's an entirely different animal, but at the same time, it's really fascinating to see all the intersections of how, no matter what industry you're in, those fundamentals we were just talking about are just as relevant, if not more so, in a digital version of a game like this. So it's been really cool to go cross sections through different industries, and see all the interlay in between and see how much it actually all still connects.
One fascinating thing about gaming is obviously you've got all sorts of monetization methods, some of which don't exist anywhere else. I mean, you've got sort of the virtual good possibilities. You've got advertising, sponsorships, or ad sales, right, which can be done directly or via SDK at a certain level. You can go direct. Then you've got potential subscription models for like premium tiers, and to the extent that you've intersected with the product team, I would imagine that like some of the decisions around that are pretty weighty. I mean, do you make it completely free? Do you make it tiered? How are you going to monetize? Then there's the whole data and privacy issue. Can you sell the anonymized data for marketing purposes? There's a lot of moving pieces in gaming that I think the gamers don't even realize are there.
Highly debated between the gamers too. Yeah. And I think it's funny because, something like Ivory Ella, we can get that momentum and we can get those initial buys off of a relatively low cost investment. When you're building a multi-million-dollar game, you don't get that same luxury. You get one shot to make sure that people like it, or you're in trouble, right? So like, especially those things you're talking about, monetization practices not coming off as predatory, not coming off as trying to make a quick buck on your customer. It's all the more important when you're putting all of that cash up front to build this product. Fortunately for me and the team, everybody has a very similar ethos. We are trying to build a free-to-play game first where people will come and enjoy it. And after they put in their 30-plus hours, if they want to reward us with some small purchases on cosmetics or smaller things, that's how we're trying to gamify it. Not to go too deep down the crypto rabbit hole either, but I'll give you like a 30-second sneak peek. A lot of people, Web3 gaming and crypto right now is a very big topic, right? And these people are launching projects and games where some people might have to spend $10,000 just to play the game, right? So this is not something that normal gamers have any interest in. This is very much, the crypto people playing in their bubble, thinking that they're making the next big thing, right?
Right.
So, we're watching this. We're seeing them drop these tokens with $1 million market caps. And I keep coming back to no gamer, no normal person is going to hold $10,000 on your game to maybe make it 10,001 in a day or two. So we're trying to flip the script, and how we're doing it is instead of having any purchases up front, any NFTs requiring you to play, we're just going to gift gamers NFTs when they make massive accomplishments in our game. You make the first 10,000 kills, we're going to reward you a one-of-one super rare NFT that you can do whatever you want with, no cost to you. You don't even need to know it's an NFT. But if your friend wants to buy it and you have that buyer, now you have the ability to transfer assets. So our whole ethos has been gamer first. What do the gamers want? We are not interested in trying to raise $100 million and then go pretend to build a game. We're building the game first. We have the product first. And then we just want to reward people in a fair way. I think that's the right approach. And we actually even just got featured in a Bloomberg article having that same conversation and trying to convey that this is a more fair way to partake in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of fairness, obviously Apple's been in the news a lot recently because, the DOJ apparently thinks like their marketplace is particularly unfair. And I think a lot of game developers, another decision they have to have pretty early on is sort of, well, what platform and or platforms does it sit on, right? So I think you guys are on Steam.
Yep.
But there had to be a decision about that, right? So where does the game live, and where does the intersection between the game experience overlap with the demographics of the people, right, who are going to be prefer these platforms? So were you involved in that, or were you sort of handed it like it's like 80% baked at this point, but we have to work with what we've got?
Fortunately, I got in early enough for some of those conversations we're still having. Like some more traditional, maybe VC minds would tell you, get to mobile gaming right away, get all of your microtransactions in there right away, have the shop open before you even launch the game. And I think, thankfully, we had some level-headed people to say, maybe that's not the best long-term strategy. Maybe that might cut our own foot off. So fortunately, that was what ended us putting up on Steam, because we have free access, the number one hub for more players. Epic as well, while they've had their, battles with Apple and their own fun news as themselves, they're actually very forward thinking for crypto and NFTs. So it allowed us to explore these different strategies with them and say, hey, is this something your platform would be open to, before trying to roll something like that out on like an Apple iOS. And then there's also PlayStation, Microsoft, all of these other platforms. Everybody has their own intake form, their own line you have to stand in. But ultimately, our goal was to say, where are people playing and having fun? Not necessarily where are people playing and spending most of the money. That's had to be part of the strategy conversation early on too.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to get into some of the gamification elements as it relates to, some game designers are more about sort of like, let's just reward or in some tokenized way, just general participation. Whereas other folks are like, no, it's really more like, if you hit milestones, and then others want to gamify it from the perspective of a reward for winning, right? And so some of that is a little bit more DAO-like in a sense that you're sort of earning your way in based on how great you are or how much you participate in the community, whereas others is sort of more coin-like, where it's just sort of, a counter, that an
Yeah.
odometer that
Yep.
picks up. And I'd love to get into your head a little bit on that, because you, the game, what you reward is the behavior that you incentivize, right? And so that makes it a non-trivial set of decisions about how you do that. And then there's all the leaderboard related element of that as well. Like, do you want the community to be able to see who's where and who and how everybody's doing compared to each other?
Yeah, no, all very good questions. And it's funny because, you know, it's not like a decision on its own, right? Like anything you kind of decide is all very interconnected, and it
Yeah.
very much changes the actual gameplay of the game itself, right? Because if you build these systems up front to be grindy, to be something like, I feel like I can reference them because they're so big, but like Axie Infinity, where you're basically farming time and hours for the hope of a small token payout, that's not a fun game. That's not something people are actually going to enjoy. So you end up just making these massive wastes of time that make really big market caps. I'm sure people have made thousands of dollars with it, but it's not a sustainable product that people actually enjoy or want to come back to. So for us, that was a big reason to say we're not going to have a token, we're not going to have NFTs, we're not going to stage gate it. We want to go back to your earlier comment of rewarding the people who behave the way we want them to, which is partaking in the game, having fun, and actually enjoying the gameplay. And that's why the NFTs and the rewards I mentioned earlier will be based off those actions, not just something like you signed in for 10,000 hours. The thing that blows my mind lately is, the new Web3 meta for gaming is play to airdrop, which is funny because last cycle it was just, hand out tokens to anybody that downloads the game. Now it's, oh, if you tweet once or twice, we'll hand out tokens. So ultimately, to me, the strategies don't seem that much different. It's give away all your money, hope people play your game, and see what happens. That's not how we're trying to build this. We want to build a game that people want to play. If they play, then they will be rewarded, and they'll be rewarded in a way where they'll stand out from the community, and it'll put them in a different threshold to have those conversations, to get people more excited. One thing we do differently, our Discord 100% open for the devs. Every week they do developer updates. Here's everything we added. Here's feedback we got from fans. Here's why we accepted the feedback or ignored the feedback. Our whole goal is transparency first. And you kind of throw that out the window when all you're trying to do is hoard your tokens and make this massive, random gaming market cap that's really there for what reason, I don't know. I wish them all the best of luck. I'm not going to name any projects, but in my belief, if gaming goes full Web3, it's going to be because Ubisoft or Bethesda or one of these major studios makes that shift. It's not going to be because some random crypto founder made a token that got to 100 million market cap and there's 3 players on the game. So that's how we're thinking about it. That's how we're trying to approach it. We know since we're indie and we're not trying to compete with those massive $70 titles, we have a very nice niche spot, and we're very optimistic we should be able to compete there.
Cool. I look forward to continuing to watch that evolution of the platform.
Appreciate that.
So going back to the Ivory Ella launch and the continued business, I think you've sort of taken back some of the management of that recently.
Yeah, so at this point, we had sold Ivory Ella to a company called Notum. Founders Matt Scanlon and Diedrich. They were basically creating, your first affordable cashmere sweater, and they decided to go down the route, which I know you're familiar with, but where all of these companies decided we're going to build a holding company and we're going to put 10 brands in the holding company, and all the brands are going to take all the same resources. It's going to be super easy and there's not going to be any complexities and everything's going to share one-to-one and yada, yada, yada. And while their intentions were great and, so was everybody else that raised money for that same idea, I think ultimately what all these people realized was it's a little harder than they might think. Brands have a lot of unique elements to them, from their mission to their purpose to their product to their customer. And I think when you try to just assume that they're all going to function the same, you might shoot yourself in the foot just a little bit. So they went down this path. They had probably 5 or 6 brands. Now they're back down to 3. And I think everything they're doing is in the right direction for sure. But they kind of lost sight of their own core and their own brand. So they decided, hey, maybe it's better to bring back some of the founders, get their own brands back on track, and let me kind of do the direction I know that works for Ivory Ella. So right now I am running the e-com site, and my fiance is actually running the wholesale business. Collectively, we have Kohl's, Dick's Sporting Goods, a couple other large wholesalers, and then we have our ever viral e-com business. Fortunately, too, as you probably know, with all of these technology changes coming and new tools available, it is fairly simple to run your own e-commerce store with a limited number of people. Is it optimized as much as it possibly could? Of course not. But you can run the business with a lot less resources than it might have taken even 10 years ago when we first launched.
Oh, for sure. I would say even 3 years ago.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So one piece of advice I'd like you to give to brands who think that they can just glue social impact onto an existing brand as opposed to have it be native to the brand. Now, you were lucky enough to, at the perfect time, you made social impact native to your brand. And as you mentioned, it made a huge difference. But we see a lot of brands out there, including some fairly big ones, deciding to glue social impact onto the existing brand, sometimes with pretty disastrous outcomes.
Yeah.
So for those folks who are sort of thinking through, well, how do I, delight my consumer in delivering social impact above and beyond a great product, right? How should they think through that process? It's possible, certainly, to add social impact onto an existing brand, but it's pretty rare in comparison to the ones that have it native from the beginning.
Absolutely. And right off the cuff, I will say, we are very fortunate for where we landed and how we set things up. I think it would have been a completely different story if the brand was not meant to make a difference. I think the reality is, millennials, Gen Z, we all are inheriting a very difficult situation, right? And everybody wants to see people try to do something to make a difference in the world. And when you live in a capitalist society and you watch these massive companies just print dollar after dollar, seemingly not giving at all of an F what happens to anybody else, it's infuriating. It is a rallying call. So for us, that was why we were like, okay, we have to do this. And this is where our community came from. But then you see other brands, exactly like you're saying, just, whatever the flavor of the week is. Oh, we're going to throw a 50% donation to this trending cause. And it's like, people see through that. And I think, especially if you are making this decision, you have to make it a serious one. And it has to be one that you're going to stand behind. You have to have a cause that's important to you because you're going to be talking about it. You need to be championing the cause or it's just going to fall flat. And I think that's something that a lot of founders really miss the mark on. It's not just about the fact that you tack this little 10% coupon at the end of your purchase. It's the fact that the brand is actively saying things that might be difficult for people to hear because they care about a cause. And in fact, I would argue that authentic voice and being able to say those things will actually make your brand stand out more and make people care about you more and make them stick around longer. I think we are in a world where people are so afraid to maybe ruffle feathers or say the wrong thing or whatever. They don't want to stick to any real cause or anything of meaning or value. And then you just become another brand. I mean, we were just talking about the tools available. There are more companies being started today than there ever was in the past. And it's not going to slow down. They're just going to keep coming. So how do you stand out? You do something that's impactful, that has a difference. At this point, I don't really see a world where I would be able to start a company and not have that kind of element because like I said, the planet is going through some stuff. It needs some help, and hopefully we can rally as many people to get behind it.
Cool. One other question I've got for you is you guys are somewhat unique in that sort of social probably plays an outsized role in your
Absolutely
with your customers. A lot of brands are more reliant on search, both organic search and paid search. And that's the area that's going to be most disrupted by chatbots, right? You'll have
Yep.
situations where you don't even see a search engine results page anymore. You just ask a question of, you know, Perplexity, Gemini, or ChatGPT, and you get one
Yep.
answer, right? You don't get a
Yep.
SERP. Now, Perplexity still has somewhat of a SERP-like experience, but certainly that, you know, a lot of queries might, you know, you might not have as much choice as a consumer, but you may not want as much choice, right? You're asking for a couple of recommendations or a single recommendation. So for those brands that are not as lucky as you guys are, right, where they're more reliant on search, you know, given the fact that the social media content actually feeds the LLM, right?
Hmm.
Should they be investing more in social and more in content and content co-creation to increase their odds, right? That they become the
Yeah.
preferred brand in an AI chatbot result.
Yeah. And I think this is a really important question because it ties into the ethos of everything with the nonprofit side of it too. It's like, you know, when you're a brand and you don't have a mission to talk about, you're essentially a salesperson reaching out, trying to convince other people to buy your product or promote your product. When you have a cause and you have something that you care about and you're trying to make a difference, it doesn't always feel that way. When I approach creators and I talk to them about coming into our community, to being shared across 4 million followers, to have a charity donation story where we've raised $2.5 million, they want to join us. It's not a matter of, hey, how much money is it going to take? It's, I want to support your brand and what you're doing because one, it'll elevate me and my profile as an influencer or a creator, but two, because you're doing something worthwhile talking about that's actually changing the world. How many random t-shirt brands are there? How many different tees can you promote on your Instagram page before you're out, right? So I think starting from that foundation and having that call to action, now I have an infinite pipeline of people joining our community, wanting to talk about the cause, creating us content, creating us ads, creating us emails, and it just keeps spiraling, right? So if you can build that funnel up front, you don't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on influencers, partnerships, photo shoots. You can build your own organic funnel, let that community grow on its own, and you'll get customers. It's not even about going to these people with 100,000 followers. It's about going to the people with 2,000 genuine people in their network that will really care if this person says, wow, this brand's super cool. They're making a difference. That's how we've been thinking about it. We've really turned away from macro influencers. We've really turned away from any of the big budgeted agency clients. We are looking for people that have the same ethos, that genuinely like the brand, and they want to talk about it. And I think that's the route brands really need to go, because when you build ad sets with those recognizable faces and then geo target their areas, it's a much different scenario than a super high done, high quality photo shoot in a New York top building somewhere. Nobody relates to that, right?
Yeah.
So that's how we've been thinking about it, and that's how we hope to keep growing the social funnel too.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with you. I mean, the combination of the authenticity and the pre-baked trust is really almost priceless in comparison to just tonnage, right? Super
Absolutely.
Bowl ad kind of tonnage, which just, you know, they try to add emotion into it, but it doesn't always fly.
Right. Right. Right.
So, any additional tips for folks out there, either in startup land or traditional marketers who'd love to sort of tap into some of that kind of, you know, power that you guys have been able to tap into?
Yeah, I think for the traditional marketers, everything I was just talking about is like the real takeaways for me. You know, people are constantly just saying like, "Oh, I'm going to spend my way out of it on Facebook," or "We're just going to get our ROAS a little bit higher if we put a little bit more cash." I just don't believe in those methods anymore. I think it's a losing game. I think you're going to spend yourself to zero. Every dollar I've spent on Facebook every year becomes less powerful than it was the year before, and that's not going to change. I think where people need to really make a difference as a marketer is build those communities, build the people that care about your brand. It's going to be a slow process. It's going to be a lot of reaching out and telling your story and getting people involved, but it's a lot more reliable than hoping somebody clicks on a Facebook ad when everybody and their brother is doing the same thing. As far as founders and startups, like, thing I really have to say is just get started. I, especially coming from somebody who started in college, blue collar family, I meet all of these people who just spend months and tens of thousands of dollars trying to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect product, the perfect plan. And I'm like, by the time you get it out there, everything's already going to change, you know? So just get started, pick a name, make a post, and start talking to people. You don't even have to have a product. Just start telling your story, and you will build a community. This is the attention economy. Everybody is online now. There are billions of customers out there. Just get started. That's the biggest thing I can say.
Great. Well, that does go just not just for the founder, but even for the big brand who's sitting there having paralysis by analysis, right?
Yeah.
And they could also just go ahead and make a move, pick a direction, and move forward. Because some of the corporate cultures, they don't really necessarily reward or encourage that kind of behavior.
They just want to play it safe and hit their ROAS, and that's it. That's their one stat. So I get it. But like you and I both know, it's not a long-term game. That's just the game of them trying to tread water and keep their job. And it makes it harder to actually grow as a brand if you're not thinking about it from what's good for the community, not just what's good for the financial quarterly report.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom that you've accumulated through lots of entrepreneurial ventures. And I'm sure there's a bunch of pearls of wisdom there that folks will be able to take back and put to use.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm happy to collab together at any point.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.